Hello and welcome to This is Recruiting. If you're joining us for the first time, This is Recruiting is a webinar series that we at HackerEarth have created to get industry experts from different fields of talent acquisition, HR, and tech recruiting to come in and give us a few insights about the stories they have, the experiences they've had, and relevant topics that you, our recruiter community, have requested. So we had a pretty interesting topic come up in one of the discussions with our recruiter community, and that was around digital talent marketplaces, specifically about the shortage of talent right now. As we all know, there's a global shortage right now in skilled talent, especially when it comes to tech talent, and it's getting harder by the day to find the right candidate to fill those roles. So we at HackerEarth have tried to make that process a bit easier for you by creating assessments and hackathons to help you find the right tech talent and match it to your company. So we have a different suite of products that we cater to right now. We have assessments that help you with attracting, sourcing, and screening your talents. We conduct completely skill-based assessments, absolutely no bias whatsoever. We have a remote interviewing tool called FaceCode, which helps you interview candidates in real time, especially for tech talent. And finally, we also have hackathons, which can help you upskill and continuously engage your talent. So with all of this, we're hoping to solve the talent shortage a little bit and help you find those developers that you'd need to connect with. But on a larger scale, we wanted to discuss this topic and we decided to get in an expert to help you. So I have today Marvin Smith, who's joining me. Thank you so much for joining me, Marvin. I love that you've been such an active person on LinkedIn. I see you connected to almost all the major recruiters. I see your insights, and I just thought we had to have you for a webinar to give us a little peek into what you think is happening in the industry today and where you think it's going to move forward. So before we get started, why don't you give our audience a little bit of an introduction?
You bet. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed being in your audience for your webinars. They've always been just a little bit different than other ones that I've attended. So I have to compliment you on your previous guests and just the way you approach them. And also I found people that I ordinarily don't listen to. So congratulations on doing some great work on that.
Thank you.
My background is a mix of third-party recruiting and for the last 20 years in corporate recruiting. So I made that transition about the turn of the century. So I've been in the corporate side of thing about a little over 20 years. And I've really focused on how to turn prospects into candidates. A lot of the work, so traditionally you would think about it as being talent sourcing, but it goes a little bit beyond that in that we were using a lot of automation and HR technology to create that engagement process. So I've had a unique experience in being able to create communities of talent, to build talent pipelines, and those kind of things. So my corporate experience has been Microsoft, the Gates Foundation for a short while, and then the last 9 years or so with Lockheed Martin. So very large kinds of companies. So my perspective on what's going on tends to be more with the Fortune 50 size companies, and so sometimes it's a little slanted. So the last year I've been a consultant. I've worked some for an HR tech firm called Seekout, a platform that is a recruiting platform as well as an end-to-end solution on how we would think about reskilling and upskilling talent. So retaining people and as well as finding them. And I also do some consulting for a company, an investment company that has a number of portfolio companies. So I do some work around talent acquisition strategy, recruitment marketing, those kinds of things. So keeps me busy and it's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting that you have such a wide variety of experiences under your belt, worked with big companies and now you're working with smaller, portfolio companies. So I think, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about the whole talent and shortage scene right now. Getting into that, let's jump into our first question, which is something we were discussing at the beginning itself. What is leading to a global talent shortage right now? And how are leaders working to bridge this gap?
It's a great question. I don't know that that I have a clear answer on it. When you think about the talent shortage, my experience is more focused on engineering and tech kinds of opportunities. So in the work that I did at Microsoft, it was in the gaming area and the mobile telephone area and those kinds of things. At Lockheed, it was around engineering and software talent. So, within my answer to things, I think the information that I have read from Gartner suggests the most logical reason for one of the major reasons for the shortages is that companies decided to all embark on digital transformation at the same time. We
Right.
saw it in anything to do with data, how quickly there was a shortage of those kind of folks and how valuable they became and the bidding wars that came after it. I think secondly, there's a lack of skills. And so at both Microsoft and Lockheed, I saw amazing investments made in STEM kinds of things. And so I think people a long time ago realized there's not enough tech talent to go around. There's not enough diverse tech talent to go around. So we saw those kinds of moves being able to go. So you've got a lack of technical skills. And so there's a lot of jobs gone unfulfilled or unfilled at this point in time. The thing that concerns me is when I read CEO surveys is that they're not abandoning the digital transformation. So they're really doubling down, they being the CEOs and of the large companies. And so they really believe that automation and, AI is kind of the buzzword that everybody's, surrounding themselves with is going to be the answer. But in the short term, we're still going to have those talent shortages. I don't see those ending anytime soon.
Yeah, but I think that makes a lot of sense, especially that there's of course a definite shortage in tech talent right now, but also I also read quite recently that the tech talent that's there as well, they're constantly looking for newer opportunities. So everyone's always on the lookout, and that's why the attrition is also really high at times. I think that's why even the Great Resignation happened and the reset and everything that came after that. But what do you think leaders are doing right now to bridge the gap? I know you said they're doubling down on digital transformation, but I'm sure there must be something that they're trying to do to retain those employees or maybe even try to upskill their existing talent to get them into tech.
Well, yeah, maybe I can make one story that kind of gives an illustration of what happens sometimes in large companies. So I worked on a project that had to do with autonomy, and when I was in my last corporate gig, and there was a notice that one of the large autonomy or autonomous vehicle companies was laying off, and so we mounted a campaign to find those people, and we identified some and recruited them and had conversations with them. And what happened was those people were making, 3 times the amount of money that our budget would afford. And so what we ended up doing was retraining people internally to take those positions. So I think sometimes we have that that model in our head, which says we're either going to build the people, train them, like a lot of the projects your organization works on. We're either going to buy the talent, so we're going to go out and recruit them, or we're going to borrow the talent. We're going to use contingent kinds of labor to fill those skills, or the final bucket is really a blend of all of them, and we might use HR technology. So it's not one single thing that can solve the problem. It's going to be a variety of things. And so I see from a strategy standpoint, the chief human resource officer is looking at, he or she is looking at that kind of a decision tree that you're going to either build, buy, borrow, or blend that together. And some of the building that's going on right now, and that's the end thing, how to retain the people we have. And it's really fascinating. It's Gartner said something that was interesting that I always kind of take into heart, and that's that in their, I think it's Talent Neuron, their product, one of their products, information says, they track the ads that people, the kinds of people we were advertising for. Right. They tracked what was being said, the kind of position that was being advertised, and they tracked the source, what were people using to find the people. So they found that a lot of people were saying the same thing, looking for the same people, and using LinkedIn and all the popular sources to find those people. And so it became rather confusing. And so part of the solution is going to be being better at, engaging your target audience. And so some of what I think about and coach people on is, how do you get people to engage with you, and how do you build these pipelines and communities of talent that you can, nurture a relationship with?
I'm sorry, I think I lost you for a bit.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yep. I did get that last sentence, though I think just the video was off for a bit. So building off on your point about, leveraging different types of HR technology, I wanted to talk about, the crux of the topic that we're dealing with right now, right? What is a digital talent marketplace, and can it help with this talent gap that we have right now?
Yes, it can help. What is the digital? It's a hard one to define. In my thinking, the digital talent marketplace, I imagine that, we go to market, with our jobs and so forth, and sort of have this shopping cart, and we're going to look at the external talent, in other words, where do they live? What do they work? What kind of skills do they probably have right now? The second place that companies are really flocking to right now is internally. They're going to add that internal dimension to it. So what internally, what kind of skills do we have? What are the gaps in those skills, and so forth? And so to me, it's kind of that intelligence that gives you the ability to understand the marketplace and the dynamics that are going on, whether it's regional or global, and just get an idea of the trends and so forth. We have so much information now, so much data that can be useful. And I think we need to understand that marketplace and map the talent that we're going to need and the skills that we're going to need. At the same time, we need to look internally, and can it fill it can make us better at our jobs. There's still going to be some shortages, and there's still a certain amount of retraining that's going to happen. There's a certain amount of the labor force, at least, within the United States. I watched 60 Minutes or a program like that the other day, and they were talking about there's 11 million men in the United States that are not actively looking for work. They've left the labor force. and they're on some sort of stipend or disability kind of thing, and they just dropped out, and I was shocked at that.
11 million. Wow.
11 million. Yeah. The author of a couple of books on the subject was being interviewed, and I just found that just remarkable. So there may be some creative ways to re-engage and get people in the marketplace. I know we've seen that in different, in the work from home model and those kind of things. We've seen some moves in that way, but I think there's still some shortages, and there's still some opportunities for people to, expand the market. There's going to be a gap between when automation can serve some of the needs that are missing and the people part of the process. There's always that kind of that tension, isn't there, between automation and the human part of the jobs and so forth. And I think we're gonna have an interesting 5 to 10 years as we work through that.
So just to build off on that question, that the point that you made there, re-engaging people within the talent marketplace. You said that the work from home model was a big thing. Have you seen it, personally in any sort of projects that you've worked on, any different ways that you've seen people re-engaging their internal talent? So
at Lockheed, I was in the work from home model the whole time. I was a remote employee. So that was pretty common for HR kinds of things. It changed during the pandemic at Lockheed, and many people went to the work from home model, most of the functional areas, other than the kinds of positions that required a SCIF and a security clearance and those kind of things.
Right.
They couldn't do those very well. So, they haven't figured out how to put a SCIF in people's homes and so forth. But for the most part, that worked well. The consulting that I've done, I see a lot of the smaller organizations still doing the work from home model. So other than when I think that's going to continue. I think we see this tension between the big companies wanting to get people back together and the people in all the surveys I'm seeing, either want a blend of work from home or completely remote kind of work experience. And I think, as you alluded to, the Great Resignation, and I didn't see the Great Resignation as much in tech and engineering as, because it just didn't happen that way. But I think, it's a very real thing. And the other element, of course, is as we switched from kind of that baby boomer generation, now that millennials are going to be the most prominent group in the workforce. And if you analyze kind of their goals and ambitions and so forth, movement is something that's very common for that group. And I think Gen Z is following suit with that. So they're not going to tolerate positions that don't give them the kind of experiences they're looking for. So there's multiple threads going through the workforce right now, if that makes sense. I think that all are going to keep things churning until, companies decide that, they want to become people first kinds of organizations, and that they want to look at projects and change the nature of work. There's a lot of conversations going on that, but it's theory right now, right? It's about, we think we can do this, but the reality is when you try to go into an existing structure, an existing organization, and operationalize these kinds of technology to meet these new words and descriptions of things, there's a clash, and it takes a while to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially, like you said, a lot of people right now, I mean, we did a whole webinar about it just the last one about quiet quitting, and we went into depth about what the current workforce is looking for, what Gen Zers are looking for, what millennials are looking for. And I think remote working, like you said, is something that's appealing to a lot of people, especially in the tech industry right now. I see a lot of organizations just allowing their engineering teams or development teams to work remotely because that's possible. So I just
So I didn't see that discussion, but I'm curious. Part of what makes Gen Z and millennials tick is the ability to learn from others and that collaboration, and that sometimes is best done in person. So I wonder if there's not going to be a blend that we end up with as opposed to complete remote work. You know what I mean? Because
right.
I think the coming workforce, the coming, dominant values in the workforce that we're going to see seem to want to do that. So it's like I said, it's not completely clear yet in my mind on what's going to happen.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting topic to delve into on its own, right? Just seeing whether a hybrid model versus a completely remote model, which one works better. And I think the data for that is probably still, in the cloud right now, because we've been doing, at least I know in India so far, since the pandemic officially or unofficially ended, and when workforces and offices could open up again, it's only been around a year or so. So everyone's still struggling whether it's the best way forward, whether hybrid is working, whether completely remote is working. I see a lot of offices going back, to work full swing, but there are many people who prefer working from home in different parts of the world or different parts of, the country itself. It's a definite thing that I think maybe we should discuss in another webinar as well. What's the final verdict on the end of the rejoining of work in total? But getting back to our questions, I think we covered this a lot in the previous one itself, your experience with digital talent marketplaces and internal talent marketplaces. So just to add on to that, do you have any tips for, our recruiter community that's on the webinar right now, that's looking to hear about, insights that they can take forward into how to deal with internal talent marketplaces or digital talent marketplaces?
It's really interesting when you think about what's the movement to suddenly retention. Last year it was diversity, inclusion, and belonging was kind of the buzzword, and everybody was moving towards that. And this year it's really, how do we keep the people we have, and how do we upskill them, how to retrain them, and that sort of thing. So the internal talent marketplace is being rolled out rapidly. I think that one of the challenges is that you need to be ready for that change. I think there's a disruptive piece of HR tech every time a large installation goes in, and particularly in an enterprise. And so it's a process. And if you think about internal mobility and you have several different groups that are involved in that. You have the talent management or the internal mobility piece. You have learning and development. You have talent acquisition, and you have HR tech. So you have really 4 different groups, and you probably have an organizational design group, maybe 5 groups of people that are going to all be impacted by that kind of move. So it's not just adding a piece of equipment. It's setting a stage so that there can be, this uniform collaborative effort to bring that forward. And I think in the enterprise, it's going to take a while for those kind of organizations, unless they're already, thinking in terms of those skills and thinking in terms of redefining how they work. Think about large organizations, there are people that hoard talent. There are managers that, if they're working on a project or they have their talent, they try to keep everybody on their projects, and sharing may not be as widespread as it's probably more of an ideal than reality. I may have lost you, so I'll keep talking until you reappear and you can ask me.
I'm so sorry. I think I lost you for a bit again.
You did, but that's okay. Well,
seems like both of us are having issues with our connection today. You with your laptop and me with my internet. Yeah.
I haven't. Thank goodness for mobile phones, right?
Right.
So I was saying that I think that there's a lot of challenges with these when we try to operationalize these different internal marketplaces, and it's like suddenly we've said we now want you, and so that's going to be a cultural change that it's going to take a while, because it really is more. It's a deeper kind of process than that. Let me give you one example. So when I was at Lockheed, I joined in 2012, and a new CEO came in, Marilyn Houston, and so I was kind of in culture shock. I had been with Microsoft, and I had been with the Gates Foundation, and then going into Lockheed. You see that that idea of a carrot or stick kind of organization. The carrot that sort of gives you the incentive to do something, and wants to nurture that, or the stick is just do it. And I think at the time I joined Lockheed, they were probably more in that stick area. You would see internal communications like, change this process or else, it was very much an order. Whereas as things progressed toward the end of it, it was more of a nurturing kind of message. And really, the CEO, I think, realized that we had half our labor force was retirement eligible there. Wow. And the other half of the workforce were millennials. So we kind of had a 50-50 split on things. And so she, over a period of years, led us through a change in which we became more appealing to the next generation of folks. At the same time, she orchestrated ways that we could mentor and have a knowledge transfer, so all of the people that were going to leave didn't leave at the same time. She was in as CEO for about 8 years, and it really took a while for that to occur. And I think sometimes it's like, you just don't stop and start doing something. It takes an artful hand to change the culture and adapt to situations. So while I think we're going to have nimble companies, and the majority of companies are going to be smaller and they're going to adapt to this, I think the larger companies are going to have to be more thoughtful, and it's going to take more time.
Right. And yep. And I think you said you've worked with while working with portfolio companies as well, have you noticed like similar sort of experiences there? I know you said in Lockheed there's a completely different field there, right? When you deal with enterprises versus when you deal with smaller companies and startups there.
Right. I think that, one thing about tech that I've always noticed is they're willing to take a chance on people. I'm generalizing, but in the last 20 years that I've been around technology companies, startups, and then, of course, the larger ones the last 15 years. I think in tech, they'll try you out in a role, and if you can fulfill that role, you can have it. So, there's still an element of, kind of defining the parameters of a job. Sometimes they've never done things before. And so you see that going on. I think you see it, not so much the formal marketplaces, but I see many companies, many of the smaller to medium-sized companies, promoting their openings internally. And I think that's the biggest part of it is, the hiring manager of today or tomorrow is probably the most valuable person in an organization. Not only do they have to run the work, they have to manage the people. And they're the ones that are really going to make a determination for diversity and whether diversity, inclusion, and equity and all those things happen, because they're the people that are orchestrating it. They're the people that are going to have to make the difference on the jobs. They're going to make a determination of whether they want to share their talent, for the good of an organization. If you think about Amazon and think about the different divisions, sometimes the competition isn't with the external world at Amazon. It's whether they can. It's internally whether they can get the talent, and some of the projects, of course, are fairly secretive that as they're creating, innovating, and so forth. So they may not even know what skills are available. So if you take an organization like that, can you imagine just how much cultural change would have to happen to put some sort of internal mobility program with an internal marketplace? So lots of work to be done. It's going to be amazing discussion, but it still comes down to tech and people and that interface between the two and what's going to work.
So before, our last question, I think, ties in very well to, tech and people, because I think whatever discussions we've had so far about the talent marketplace and everything you've experienced, across your wide corporate career, as well as your career right now working as a consultant, I just wanted to end our webinar, by asking you about what you see for the future, because you've given us so much insights about the present, about the past, and what we can expect. But in the future, I know that you recently attended the HR Technology Conference as well. And I'm pretty sure a lot of discussion naturally would have happened there about technology and HR and what's the upcoming thing that we can expect. So can you give us a little bit about what you experienced there and any, great takeaways that you had from that entire thing? Is there anything that you foresee with digital talent marketplaces as well?
Well, yeah, first and foremost, it was just good to get to a conference, and it was kind of a reunion. A lot of us that, saw each other at different conferences and events, haven't seen each other face to face. So it was a great opportunity for that. So,
we were there as well. We had like a little bit of a booth at the conference, but it was so big, and like there were our booth, because we ended up signing off quite last minute. It was just like a tiny booth that we had. But I heard the stories from everyone who attended. It was massive, and I could see the pictures and the number of booths around there. Ridiculous how big it was.
Yeah, it was. And so the topic du jour was really retention. And so there was a lot of organizations that offered single source solutions. So you saw vendors for employee recognition. You saw vendors for onboarding. You saw people that were managing the benefits. They were managing the leave, and those kind of things. And so, and then you saw the larger organizations, offering these solutions. At the same time, you had analysts that were promoting a little bit. Well, they do a lot of promoting. I think there's a big fight to get your logo on the analyst's
right.
PowerPoint slide. Yeah. It felt a little. You wondered where the objectivity was. Conveniently, the people that were sponsoring folks kind of ended up recommending those. So, it was more of a pay for play than it was really a objective analysis of what tech was available. But I think my takeaway was there were more people looking for partnerships. More of the vendors were looking for partnerships there than people were looking to buy a solution. And so what I think that portends that there's going to be a lot of integration or better integration with some of the single source, solutions. And, so if you were a vendor that had, a way to model skills, and, do you partner with somebody that, like a Seek Out that's building, an end-to-end kind of solution, or, do you partner with an Eightfold who's trying to define, the space and so forth. So you have and then you have Microsoft, and you have some of the more larger Workday, they're all competing for that. And so it's going to be interesting. My favorite part of HR tech has always been going to the startup space where they all have, little stalls, and you kind of get some ideas of where people are heading. So I always like to see what's coming. And this year there were so many people in that the pitch fest was cool to watch. And so you got a little bit more of a presentation of what people were thinking. And so that was kind of exciting. I think the real takeaway for me was there's a lot of great ideas. There's been billions of dollars put into HR tech, and people are coming to HR tech not from the domain, not from recruiting and talent acquisition and training, but they're coming in from other parts of engineering because they're chasing the money. And there's a real lack of domain experience. When I talk about operationalizing something, I'm talking about, imagine the impact. When I was at Microsoft, we brought in SAP for changed ATS vendors. And so there are some side effects from that technology that you don't anticipate. So there were parts. So we went through the training, all of us, there were 40 or so people in the area I worked, and we all went for the week of training and process and the workflow. And when we implemented the workflow, there were parts of the workflow that recruiters just didn't do. And so they had to go out and hire a lot of contingent workforce, about another 20 people or so, to do the things the recruiters wouldn't do, or it didn't work. They couldn't do their jobs and still do whatever that was required for this new technology. And I think that's going to happen a lot. I think that in the domain itself, there are things that people haven't experienced yet. And so there's going to be opportunities, I think, for recruiters and people with recruiting kinds of background to partner more or move to these vendors and provide that expertise, if that makes sense. So it was interesting there. The future is bright. It's a little chaotic in terms of who's going to win. I think we'll have tools that will help us be better recruiters. I think we're going to have assessments. I think we're going to have all of those kind of things to make us be better at that. I think it's going to take a while to move to a skills to move from job description to skill kinds of work, and think about redefining work and putting it into projects and gigs and those kind of things. But it's exciting, isn't it? You guys are right in the middle of it. It's one of the things that I still have, and I really don't have the answer yet. It's always fun. One of the things that I like to do is to understand better what makes the target talent tick, what motivates them. And so when I read something like your survey of data, I get excited because it tells me about the people and what they're looking for. And so when I put on a marketing hat, I want to better understand the people part of it and how we can, provide what the kinds of parameters they're looking for, because ultimately it's going to take that shift to where it becomes about them and not about us if we're going to win the day. And we still haven't arrived at that yet. We've seen it in action for the last dozen years or so, and it's becoming more and more obvious with the Great Resignation that we're going to have to change our mindset. And I think that's what the future. It's going to be painful for some and easy for others, to get there.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, we're right in the middle of it. We deal with skill-based hiring. And I think it is exciting to see more companies move into it where, they're not just hiring on pedigree anymore. People are waiting to see and put everyone at an equal level while hiring. That's something we firmly believe in at HackerEarth. Skill-based hiring, no bias whatsoever. And even with engagement and upskilling, I think, that's what we are looking to achieve through our hackathons. And that's what we're pushing for. But yeah, it's definitely an exciting time to see where things are going from here. Like we're almost at the end of 2022 now. And while retention was probably the biggest thing this year, it's pretty cool to see what might come next year. I think diversity and inclusion, like you said, the belongingness has toned down a lot this year. Initially, at the beginning of the year, we still saw more people, still attending our webinars on the same topic. And I'm just going off on the data we have based on the topics we get from our recruiter community. But before we end, let me move into our questions because we have a couple of questions that's come in. One thing is someone has asked if you could elaborate on the tools that you currently use. You mentioned a lot of HR technology tools that you're using or that you've used in the past, and whether you could just give us a bit of a highlight into what you use in your day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was building talent communities, I used a platform called Brave New, which was a platform that allowed you to set up a community. And so the communities we set up were not the kind of, they weren't a database that you spammed with. It was actually a community where you had a conversation. So we would take a group of people and like veterans and create a community and have conversations with them and provide some assistance to them in their transition from military to civilian life. We had another one for early career engineers. And so we worked with them in terms of as they left college, let's say, and transitioned and also, the first couple of years of their job. So we tried to have people in there that were practitioners, that were engineers, and sharing those experiences. Most of my work in the last couple of years were really, it's about building pipelines of talent. And so we used a CRM, which you need to nurture the relationship. And we used a platform. In my case, I happened to use Seekout because it worked really well with the CRM, which was Avature that we used at Lockheed. And so we were able to create nurture paths with content that was valuable. And when I talk about content that's valuable, I'm not talking about a job necessarily. I'm talking about, profession-based kinds of content. So it's, what's relevant and valuable to the person in the particular stage they are. That's really, we tried to map out what a prospect journey would look like, a candidate journey would look like. And they're really two different things. And I worked with great people. I mean, I think to make anything work, you have to have a great boss, somebody that believes in the mission and gets the best out of you and isn't afraid to take on, manage upward and get things done. You have to have great teammates, and without that, it's not going to work. What we saw was bringing people with sort of different skills together worked really well. You might have somebody that was really on a team that I would work on. I had a great talent sourcer, and she could make things wonderful. And we had a great, more tech person that was doing putting the different aspects of the activities together and putting the workflows together on the CRM side. And then I tried to provide the value in terms of, messaging that would engage people and spend as much time looking at those kinds of the psychographic kind of information as I did on finding the people, because I think we can find people today. We have the tools to do that. It's really, how do you attract them, engage them, and build that trust relationship you need? So there are a lot of tools that do the same thing, but you as the human tool, if you will, I think I encourage you to spend more time thinking about what, stepping into your talent target audience's shoes and saying, what would motivate them to make a move? And that's where I think the key to success in recruiting is right now.
That's very true. I think, I like the little snippet about, putting yourself in the shoes of the talent that you're attracting. I think that's very quotable.
Yeah. It's just basic empathy. How do they feel when they receive that email or they receive that text message? What's on their mind and what kinds of things? I mean, you can go into Maslow and the hierarchy of needs, or you can use other kinds of social scientists or psychologists, but that's really where things are going now, I think, is just to better understand people, not to manipulate them, but at least to gain their attention and all this noise that's going on, right? So
right.
It's deciding which voice we're going to listen to, and there's a lot of voices out there.
We have another question here that's, I think, more aimed. I think it's probably one of your followers, because someone has asked us, how did you build your following on LinkedIn? I think this is more of a recruitment marketing aimed question.
Well, at which point, I was in the first 250,000 people on LinkedIn. So,
wow.
It's over time, I think. But first, I just tried to build from people that were that would connect. It was all about volume, and in the last few years, it's really been about who can I serve best. And so, it became apparent to me that what I wanted to do was to be part of the community. And it really started with SourceCon and back in about 2007 or 8, somewhere in there. And it was, SourceCon was very influential in a lot of the people that have been involved in technology and sourcing and automating tools. And so it became then, how can I have conversations with people that are going to be relevant to what I'm doing? So almost exclusively the last 13 or 14 years has really been around, building out relationships with recruiters and people that are involved in talent acquisition and so forth. And so it's been more on purpose there. You had a gentleman on a few months ago, Joel,
right,
who I think if somebody wants to learn how to do it right, I would go check out him and what he had to say on your pod or your caught your cast, because he was really very specific. He came from nowhere to having lots of followers. And, you know, I may have 28,000 people that I'm connected to on the first degree, but, you know, he, I think, had a more contemporary approach to things. Right now it's about, you know, I maintain that. Sourcing got involved in social media around 2005, 2006. And a lot of the people that I was contemporary with, you know, saw that as it was a wild, wild west. And so what we found is you need to be social in social media. And so you can't serve all the people. And so what I try to do is congratulate people when, you know, they get promoted or change jobs, and just stay in light connection that way. And if there's an opportunity, if somebody's laid off, I'll, you know, open my network up to them and so forth. Sometimes, because I've been at this a while, you know, I hear about things and can help people informally. And that's really what it's all about, is giving back, right? Is building community and those kind of things. And LinkedIn allows you to do it at scale. And, but there are people that are more experts than I am on that today. So I'm going to deflect that a little bit.
Just in case anyone in our audience wanted reference to what Marvin was saying, we had a webinar earlier this year with Joel Lalji, who did social recruiting. So you can catch that on our resources page. You can just check out. I'm going to add our website here in a bit. You can just check it out, hackerearth.com/recruit, and find our resources page to all the webinars that we've conducted in the past, along with ebooks as well as guides on social recruiting, on and any other topic on recruitment itself. With that, I think, we've come up to the end of the webinar. Marvin, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for taking out, you know, the time from your day and being here, giving us your insights, not just about all the years of experience that you've had, but also, you know, the continued experiences you have in attending conferences, in attending these different events, and even your LinkedIn following too. It's been great having you here.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Yep. I hope to have you on some other time soon enough. I think, you know, I can see a couple of great reviews coming in here to me. But yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who attended. Please fill in our survey form to give us, you know, your insights on what you'd like to see in future webinars and any topics you'd like us to cover. We also have free demos of HackerEarth assessments as well as our hackathon. So if you'd like to check out our products, do fill in the survey form. Thank you again, Marvin. It's been great having you. I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.